All right, it's about 11:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our fourth session of Virtual Vernal Poolooza 2021. You may have heard of the event before or attended previous sessions, but for those of you who are new, welcome, and here's a little bit of background. We had our first Vernal Poolooza conference in 2019, and that was held in person at Ashland University. And it was a big success. This year we decided to go virtual, but next year we'll have another in-person conference. And that takes place, as you can see on this flyer, March 24th through the 27th. So save the date, and we're also calling on speakers to present. So if you're interested, please feel free to reach out to our OWA president, Mark Dilley, and his email is here below. So this year we're running a virtual series made up of 5 parts, and these all take place on Friday afternoons. Let's see if I can switch my slide. There we go. So you can see the topics and dates listed here. So always going 11:30, and we try to wrap up about 12:30. These take place February through May, and you can find more information on the topics and the registration links on our Eventbrite website. These are also posted on Ohio Vernal Pools Network, Facebook, and Twitter page. Be sure to sign up for the last session, May 21st, where we'll hear from Thomas Biebenhauser on vernal pool development and restoration. If you've missed the previous 3 sessions or can't make the next one, don't worry. The videos are recorded on YouTube under Ohio Wetland Association Vernal Poolooza. And so each session is 45 minutes. So we hear from experts. Today we'll hear from landholder experts about vernal pools on their property. And then we have about 10 to 15 minutes of vernal pool field footage to get you out and about in the local vernal pools around Ohio. Over the course of the series, you'll see how vernal pools change over the course of the spring, and also see what's living in them. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to use the chat, and we'll also have time for the questions at the end of our interviews today with the 3 presenters. So during this week's presentation, we are focusing on land management, recommendations from successful landholders. This will include David Orndorf, David Hague, and Joel Leslie, who will be talking about maintenance and restoration of vernal pools on their properties at Coyote Run, Centerburg, and Killdeer Wildlife Area, respectively. Mick Micacchion, who has worked for the Nature Conservancy and Midwest Biodiversity Institute, is leading the discussion with landowners. Mick, thanks so much for being here and organizing the topic and presentations for today. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, and just remind all of our participants to mute when you are not speaking. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to start with David Hague's presentation, and David and his partner Tammy Miller have property they purchased near Pickerington, and they've done some really interesting things with it. And David, we're ready to hear you talk about your what you've done with your property. So.
Looks good, David. We can see your screen. You'll just hit resume slideshow there at the top.
You okay? Oh, very good. Thank you. Thanks for everyone's patience here. Yes, welcome to a presentation on Coyote Run. We are located in Pickerington, which is just outside of Columbus, and we have about 900 acres, and about half of that in agricultural use. And our goal is to restore it as much as we can prior to settlement. And as you might expect, most of our time is spent controlling invasives. And I think that would be a never-ending project. Our threats are, other than eminent domain, is the heavy population around us, since we have Columbus and all the suburbs that are pretty close to us. We have about 200 acres of wet woods. It's in the center of the property. And we have about 50 water features, I'll call the wetlands or vernal pools, and about 20 are original. We've probably lost a lot of that in our area because it's all hydric soil, but we'll do what we can with what we have. So our question was, what do we do about it? Except for invasive control, we tend to leave our natural vernal pools alone. Don't think we can really improve upon nature. So in addition to that, we don't allow any paths in the woods or any type of mechanization for soil compaction. I have a list there of the known invasives. I won't read them because I'm going to give them any more credit than they already have. We've had 4 types of salamanders that we've discovered, and we haven't really done anything thorough other than that, so we don't know what else we have. We need to do some in-depth biological inventory of our vernal pools. That's on the to-do list. We do trapping with minnow traps, something that I question every year. We don't want to do any harm. We do that so we can determine the species and which pools are doing what, try to get an idea of the approximate beginning and ending of the season. Salamanders, like for a lot of people, are kind of ambassadors for us. It gets the public involved, and we try to get the public involved so that they can love Coyote Run as much as we do and hopefully push back against development. But we do ask if it's the right thing to do. We don't want to harm any of our native flora and fauna. We are considering doing some boardwalks that might help with some of the access. 2017, we targeted an area for restoration into wetlands first, and then hopefully become vernal pools once the forest kicks in. You'll notice we have a north and south woods around the blue marked areas, and those where our vernal pools are, so hopefully we can connect the two. We obtained a grant from EPRI, which paid for about half of the cost. Again, we asked ourselves if that's the right thing to do, but it felt like the right thing to do. Here's an aerial view of the 36 acres. Notice the woods on either side. So that's what we're trying to connect. Maybe in 100 years, you'll see lots of woods there. Drainage ditches is what the arrows are pointing out, and that's a problem because it did drain this field that we're trying to convert. And they were put in about 50 years ago. They never really functioned that well because the area is so flat, so they needed to be removed. So we worked with Fairfield County Soil and Water to do plans to try to restore it where we think pooling area was before. I was concerned about compaction from the heavy equipment you see there. But it had been in agriculture with tractors on it, so I guess that's not too much more. Our reconstruction was a best guess, what it was like 150 years ago. We also broke the tiles so we could try to retain the water. And we also tried to, when we scooped out the areas, try to keep them no straight lines and to keep a minimum of depth. Here's a view of the 28-acre field after the wetlands were put in. We created 17 water features. Some of the pools ended up being a little bit deeper than we expected. We should probably have been a little more careful about that. Hopefully they'll silt in over the years. We planted 2,800 trees. We used a census from 1950 to determine the species that's what was already there. So that's what we put in. And we could have allowed just natural reforestation, but our hope was to try to get a canopy over the area to reduce the amount of invasives we've had to deal with. And that's probably not going to pan out real well because half the trees didn't make it, but that's probably pretty typical. An error I made was planting the trees too close to the water line. Once they started filling with water, some of our poor trees got stranded out there. And some of the slopes could have been a little bit more gentle, but they're actually pretty good. We have found in 5 of our new pools, salamanders have begun to colonize it, which we're happy with that. If they think it's okay, then I guess we think it's okay as well. We did, the errors point to some of the dead ash trees we drug out when it was frozen over and hope to kind of jump starting the natural habitat. Lesson learned was to do that before the water gets in there and before you plant all the other trees. Just bad timing on my part, but it got done okay. This is the ditch we talked about a little while ago. So it's no longer a continuous ditch. We use some fill to fill in segments that allowed us to create some water features where the ditch used to be. Kind of underestimated how much water that ditch did take out of the area, and the pools did get a little bit bigger than we expected. Another problem we had is cornfield or crop field was a little bit too close to the project. So we're kind of pushing that back each year, probably have about 100 feet gap now. I would like to do more. That kind of brings us to what we're looking for in the future. This is a picture of the project borders on the far left. The rest of it's an agricultural field. I've put blue circles around areas that to me look like kind of future wetlands maybe. So that's kind of what we're thinking about. The area that's bordered in black is on track to be the 140th State Nature Preserve. In the center of that's our 2018 project. And this is something we're really happy about because if we're going to protect the land in perpetuity, it's probably the best way we found to do that. So we're excited to have that as one of the state nature preserves. Someone told me once that I shouldn't do that because it takes an act of the governor to get out of a preserve. And I told him that's exactly why we're doing it. We want it to stay there in perpetuity. So what's next? The whole farm is almost all hydric soil. So we have to the east a 250 acre crop field that produces income and has been doing that for 150 years. But it sure would be nice to extend the wetlands out there. So that's something we're thinking about. It's a big step to remove agricultural land because that's income. But every time I walk out in that field, it just, to me, says to restore me. To the south, another field that is under CRP now, but it too could be part of the greater wetland complex that too has the same question of agricultural use. And also to the east, we have a large field there that's mostly hydric soil that would be a great addition. Of course, all these additions we're talking about here will take decades to mature, but doing nothing and they'll just stay in cornfields. So they're kind of on the list for consideration. To the far east of the property is an even bigger field, and you can even tell from the slide there that there are places on there that would be ideal for restoration. A lot of dark, rich soil, and there are depressions out there that I'm certain, from my novice point of view, were vernal pools at one time once it was all forested. So that's also a possibility. So if we did all that, that's about 800 acres. The challenge with that is, as you can see there, there's housing developments up against us, and it is all slated for development as the local leaders try to, or political leaders, push for development. If we had maybe a little more than a square mile, I think perhaps we would have enough of biodiversity and continuity that maybe it would be a good wetland in the future. So these are special thanks for the people that have helped us so far, as well as our contact information. As you can tell, we question what we do a lot. First, do no harm. So we are trying to do the best we can to restore it the best we can. So that's what's going on with Coyote Run right now. Thanks, and any questions?
I think we'll hold the questions till the end, if you don't mind,
Sure.
David. And really appreciate your presentation. Thanks so much. We'll get back with questions later. David Orndorf, are you joined with us now? Okay, we'll assume maybe he's not, and we'll work on that. So Joel, do you mind going ahead and with your presentation at this time? Can you unmute yourself? Could you unmute?
Hello.
Hello.
Okay. My name is Joel Leslie. I'm from Wyandotte County. This whole mitigation thing for us just came about as a kind of a special interest of mine. I work with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. So I was familiar with wetland restoration projects. I was familiar with wildlife management, these type of things. As a matter of fact, I work in Marion County as a district conservationist currently. I've been here since 2000. I've had the great pleasure of working with people such as Mark DeBrock and Frank Gibbs over the years. So they've been very interesting people to talk to, not only in our NRCS work in restoration, but also in this project. I think in talking to Frank probably back in the late 2007, 2008, I got interested in this. I think he directed me to Mick at the time, who was just fantastic in terms of getting us involved in a project that had become available. We were approached to do that from EPA, and how this worked is, again, Mick gave me all the guidance I could ever need to do this, from starting the project to finding a suitable site, to getting clear into the mitigation agreement writing and all those type of things. I believe we had Mick up, and it must have been early 2008, and we took a little cruise of our farm, or some of our farms and neighboring farms, and we decided, looking at the soils and those type of things, we had a great site potential. Once that ball got rolling and we kind of committed to this thing, we went through with the EPA and we received a payment basically to do the project. At that point in time, it was all interesting. Once it was on the books and in the bank, or however you want to call it, then I got really nervous. Because like I said, through USDA, we do a lot of wetland restoration projects through see our conservation reserve program and those type of things. But our programs basically build wetlands, put some prairie grass around it, and then we call them good and we let nature take over. Once I realized, oh, we've got 5 years of monitoring and goals to meet and those type of things to get done and to obtain, I got very nervous. And you have to realize we farm as a family. We have a family farm. We farm about 2,000 acres in Wyandotte County and Marion County. And my father's currently 92. My mother's 88. When this came about in 2007 and 2008, they kind of looked at me like I was crazy. Like, why are you, why would you want to do this to one of our farm, to some of our farm ground and take it out of crop production? Because they are just, like I said, it's a family farm. My dad's farmed his whole life. And I said, well, it just, I think it's the thing to do. I'm sure everyone's familiar with Killdeer Wildlife Area. It's pretty wet. So we farm right adjacent to the wildlife area on County Road 71, where this is located. We have plenty of wet areas and wet pockets that are not productive. So when you start looking at the productivity of the soils and what you can get out of this, or what you can get out of crop production, it wasn't really hard to convince my parents that maybe this is something we should just try. Just let's. In our site was 4.3 acres, so we're not talking a large amount of space or a large footprint on the farm, but it does match right up against existing woods and those type of things. So it fit in very well. So we got into the process, and again, luckily, with my employer, with being USDA, I had access to knowledgeable people. Excuse me. Like I said, Frank Gibbs on the soils and Mark DeBrock on the wildlife plantings, those type of things. I leaned on them a little bit, to help me out. We even did some surveying. We got the site built in the fall of 2008. We had all the earthwork done. It was basically a soybean stubble field. So it was a clean slate to work with. We got that all done, all built. I thought it looked great. Until I realized the next spring when those pools actually filled up with water, what we really had the potential to have, because then they looked really, really nice. We started in 2009. We started with the seedings, the hydrophytic vegetation, those type of things that, like I said, I was not that familiar with. We did the tree plantings. I mean, we did all the labor ourselves. We hired a local friend to do the earth moving, but we did all the seeding, all the planting, all the tree plantings, all the little things we tried to do to make it better, like dragging in trees and those type of things, just like they showed earlier on some of the projects, to make it kind of age it quicker than it really was going to do naturally, which I think all turned out real well. And then the real fun started, because we met David Sedlick through ATC, and they're the group that we hired to do our monitoring and consulting and those type of things. And that was a to me, very interesting project to go out there and monitor, for 5 years, from 2009, I believe, to 2013, to do the water sampling, to do the amphibian sampling, the vegetation, all those type of things. Again, nothing I have ever been familiar with or ever been involved with before. David was great to work with. He was very knowledgeable, very explanatory of what they were looking for, what we needed to do, what we needed to get, what the goals were here in the end run. So it was a very enjoyable experience to do that with him and to go through all that process. We got to the end of the 5-year period, and I'm just nervous as all get out, because I don't even know if we're going to pass this 5-year test. But we got approved, I believe, in May of 2013. Big sigh of relief, not only to me, but also to my parents, because we were all a little nervous about what if this doesn't work, what if this doesn't pass, but it all worked out very well. So what we have now, to me, is a great looking wetland. The vegetation, I'm not an expert, but a lot of things I can see that we have planted and transplanted, and the trees are taller than I am at this point. And it's only been 8 or 10, 11 years. It looks great. Of course, it's a great wildlife area, but again, we're around Killdeer, so we have a lot of wildlife that come and go through there. When I think of wildlife, I think of ducks and deer, I guess, but I'm not, I'm not an expert on anything else. But we've really enjoyed it. I have really enjoyed it. My kids have enjoyed it, because they've kind of come and gone with me back there over the years. So it's been a great thing to do, and we just appreciate it. Like I said, Mick, really at the get-go, really helping us out. People like Frank Gibb and Mark DeBrock, and of course David for walking us through this thing for 5 years. But it was really an enjoyable process.
Hi, Dave. Just stay on here, and I'll get right back.
That's great. Thanks so much, Dale. I think
Thank you, Joel.
sounds like Mick got David Orndorf on the phone.
I've got him on the phone, and we're going to just try to do it over the phone. He's having trouble getting connection in any other way.
Sounds good.
All right. You ready to go on this, Dave? Okay, I'm going to turn up the volume. I'll get you as close to the speaker as I can. You're going to have to talk loud, Dave. So this is David Orndorf on the phone. He's had trouble connecting, but Dave owns land a little bit north of Sunbury, Ohio, and has done a great job because the place had vernal pools when he moved there, and he's done things to protect them over the years. And we're going to let Dave talk. I'm going to ask him some questions, and he'll provide the responses. Dave, you said your property is a little bit north of Sunbury. How much land do you own, and how long have you owned it? Can you hear me, Dave?
Yeah, I can see you too.
You're,
Can you put them on speakerphone?
yeah.
Click to join audio, but My computer is an old one and I probably don't have it.
I think we're using my phone and we are hearing you. So
Well, I can hear you speaking and hear you on the phone, but I can't, I don't, can you hear me on screen? Just on the telephone.
We hear him pretty good now that he's on speakerphone with the phone, so he can go.
they can hear you pretty good. So how much, how long have you owned your land?
41 years.
Wow. And what prompted you to buy there?
Well, I went on the prowl for a place. I got a hold of a number of realtors. The criterion was I wanted a place with forest and an open area to build a pond. And after some false starts, I stumbled onto this place, and it was appealing immediately because of the size of the timber in here. It clearly was a very old woods, and even in 1978, had no stumps in it or anything else. At the time, I was unaware that there was a vernal pool on the place, but as I was walking through it after purchase, I actually stumbled upon the pool and was aware of its significance, but we didn't get around to putting traps in it until a year or two later. My neighbor, Al Blight, who has a wildlife degree but is a carpenter by trade, urged me to put in some traps. So we did so, and were astonished by what we found after the key day, the first warm rain after the freeze is over and so forth. So it was, that's that's a picture of me, what's left of me on there. Anyway, we were astonished and trapped it every year. And initially it was smallmouth, Jeffersons, spotted, and newts. Al's grown daughter, Lauren Blythe, had a degree in outdoors and mastered in amphibians, and she was able to sex the critters, and we did an inventory of them every year, and of course there was a ton of wood frogs back there as well about the same time. It seemed like it was smallmouth, Jefferson, and then quickly followed by spotteds, and a short time later by newts. And then some years into the program, we became aware that four-toed salamanders were there. And you don't just see them in the pool. You have to go down after dark in the rain and look around the moss at the edge and so forth. But we got those vouchered, found out they were there. And all the usual invertebrates were present, fairy shrimp and crayfish and caddisfly larvae, et cetera, et cetera. And then by a miracle, I'm going to say 8 or 10 years ago, I was digging in the woods with a trowel to plant ginseng and uncovered a marbled salamander. And as you know, this is way out of the range of marbles that are typically found down in the unglaciated part of the state. I was so astonished that I took it over to Al, and we got it vouchered, called Finkston and Greg Lips, and they said, man, that's a county record. You got to get that on. So we took pictures and got it vouchered, and subsequently over the years have found 5 or 6 more specimens. So clearly there is a breeding population here, and anybody that has a copy of Amphibians of Ohio looks at the range map to see how prominently this place stands out. This is Porter Township, northeastern Delaware County. I suspect the variability is so great because of the age of the woods. As mentioned, forestry is my background, and these trees are at least 150 years old here. I have aerial photographs going back as far as 1939, and it was a mature woods even then. So it's a pretty nifty thing. And so we've trapped it every year, kept close eye on what's going on out there. And ultimately, I wanted to get a conservation easement. And if anybody can hear me who has a vernal pool and any kind of significant land, I urge you to do that. There's a real temptation to high-grade timber and or subdivide, particularly here now. Land prices are outrageous. It's $35,000 an acre for 5 acres of cornfield. So there's a big temptation for everybody to cut everything up and pocket the cash. But if you got something like this, no way.
Yeah, your land is really special, and
Yeah, you of course have been here, so you know what the place is, how it lays out. But your associate Brian Garr, when you were up here doing a study, found 13 kinds of ferns here just one day meandering around. And I think I had mentioned to you that I have deeded this property over to Delaware County Preservation Parks on a life estate basis. And since I have a hobby orchard here as well as the timber, it's going to be called Orchard Oaks Preserve when I'm gone. And they're probably waiting anxiously for the black Cadillac to come up the driveway right now. We just had the annual daffodil show here. It's one of my other fixations. They've got a couple of thousand daffodils we planted here in 100 some varieties, and this is their time to shine. And yeah, there you go.
well, we certainly hope it's not soon.
Say again?
We certainly are looking forward to that as far as the black Cadillac.
Yeah, that's a pretty good picture right there.
All right.
You know, now being 80 years old, digging in the ground and, planting daffodils is a hard thing. But every year I get those catalogs and they show some new varieties. I just got to do it. And finally, I found a neighbor over here who builds decks for a living. And he said, oh, hell, I've got an auger, so I kill a spot where I want the new daffodils to go, and he comes over with that auger, drills them out immediately. I just have to go throw the bulbs in and cover them over now. So I just have this yen to keep beautifying this place. And ultimately, the understanding I have with the park system is this is not going to be a park. This is a miraculous bird watching zone too, because we have successional growth here, mature forest, prairie, aquatics. So any of those who know Charlie Bombassi, who is a compiler for the Breeding Bird Atlas, came over here in June after the migrants were through to see what was breeding and found 78 species of birds in 4.5 hours. So it's really a nifty, special place. And my understanding with the park is there are no sledding hills, no baseball diamonds, no dogs, no joggers, no bikes on the path. This is to contemplate woodland, mature woodland, and to continue to take care of the vernal pool. So I'm a happy guy. I'm 80 now, but I think I've done my part on as best I can for keeping something nifty for future generations. And boy, the black times are right around the corner. So hopefully I've done my part. And anybody listening that ever wants to see this place, we have 2 county records here, the Fort Hood and the Marbles. They're found nowhere else in Delaware County. And anybody that ever wants to come here and hike and look around, practically trampled to death by turkeys this morning. So we kind of got it all here, right? Wood frogs, etc.
You're loaded. Yeah.
Comes by every couple of days and takes a dive in the pond, and an eagle nest is nearby. So I've been really pleased.
What's some of the most memorable things that you've seen happen, either in or around your vernal pools over the years?
Well, the land has been kept in the same stage. One of the parts of the conservation easement calls for the 35 acres of woodland to be untouched. Nothing can be added or subtracted. And I must confess, I did put a clause in, except fungi. So if I ever stumble across a morel in here, I can take that out. But we yank some garlic mustard out when we see it. But it's pretty nifty. A lot of twin leaf, a ton of gold seal in here, and in the area around where I live, we've had a lot of problems with plant thieves coming in as from far away as Coshocton and Curry County, because this area is rich in gold and steel, and apparently ginseng as well. I must confess, I've never found any actual ginseng here, but we found showy orcus back there and all the standard, Dutchman's breeches and bloodroot and trout lilies and trilliums too. We've got a deer issue here, and if you're in the orchard business, that's something else you have to deal with. But it's been a great thing. There's just a ton of minks running around, and the picture here doesn't show the size of some of the trees that are in here. I've been keeping track of the circumference of 30 trees for 26 years. When they're dormant in the winter, I go around, but I know where they all are, and to see what the growth rates are. And the slowest ones seemingly are beeches, and the highest ones, I've got some bald cypress planted around here that are growing at an astonishing rate. And, but a lot of the oak trees, this is a heavy oak area. There's 7 or 8 varieties here: large white oak, swamp white, red oaks, of course, and the bigger ones range between 125 and 150 inches in circumference. And there's one bur oak here that's 200 inches in circumference. So they're old trees, and I'm sure this place was cut way back in time, but it had to be mid-1800s or thereabouts. The trees that were here now were probably too small to cut back then, but never ever saw a sign of a stump in here. A lot of mossy logs laying on the ground, and I don't know, how'd you get these pictures? Maybe you took them when you were up here before, I guess. But
Jenna actually put those together. I'm not exactly sure how she got them, but
okay. Well, it's nice having some kindred spirits out here. I lament all the time about kids' noses being stuck on those damn screens. And when I was a boy, we shot BB guns and climbed trees, built forts, flipped rocks to see what was underneath them and stuff. And nowadays, there isn't one kid in 300 that can tell you the difference between an oak and a maple tree, I suspect. And it's one of the reasons I'm a big supporter of Stratford over here, that introduces children to the outdoors as one of their main functions in Delaware County, and that's one of my favorite charity organizations. So I got to keep the ball rolling for the next generation.
well, thank you, Dave. That's a great presentation. Really interesting hearing about your land.
Yeah, it's again, anybody listening that is inclined to come up here and look around, is certainly an open invitation. You can provide my phone number freely to anybody that wants to get a hold of me. Just let me know.
Okay.
In the summertime, it gets a little more mosquito-y out there, but this is a great time of year. The trees are just leafing out. The warblers are coming through, and life is good. Now, just remaining vertical is the order of the day.
Sounds good. Thanks. Hey, stay on the line. We're going to do some questions now, and maybe that you get asked a question. So you mind staying on the phone in case somebody wants an answer?
Well, I'd be happy to answer anything.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah, you bet.
You want to, I think we're ready for questions, and I believe people can use the chat box for the questions. Looks like maybe there's some already on there, so let's take a look at what we got.
Yes, we have the experts here, so feel free to type any questions. I'm not sure if people can unmute themselves as participants here, but if you can, feel free to unmute and ask your question as well. Thank you. Great presentations.
Well, I see in the question box, where is Mr. Orndorf's property located? I am about a mile from Olive Green in Porter Township, Delaware County, extreme northeastern Delaware County. You'll see a dot on the arrange maps for newts and marbled salamanders who stands out because it's so isolated. But officially, I live on Plantation Road, 5233 Plantation Road. It cannot be seen from the road. You have to come down a long lane and get to the house, and then the woods is contiguous with the rest of the place here. So you're certainly welcome to stop by if you want. The daffodil show's on the downhill slide right now. Everything's a week early this year, and I'm getting ready for the cicada onslaught on my apple tree grafts. I have some 1- and 2-year-old grafts that are cotton candy for cicada egg laying. So I'm trying to figure out a way to. I've been saving onion sacks and pantyhose and cheesecloth and anything else I can find for the last year to put out on the to try and protect them for 3 or 4 weeks while the cicadas do their thing. Just to give you an idea, there's hot and cold areas in zone 10 here, but in 2004, when they last appeared here, I was 63 at the time, found myself wondering if I was going to see the next one at age 80, and now here we are. But I must say, I'm not concerned about being 97 and seeing the next one. But anyway, there's little pre-emergent mounds all over out here now that look like a crayfish excavation downsized to the side of your little fingernail, and they're just under there waiting for the soil temperature to get right to come out. But when they were out in 2004, I cleared a measured square yard, and there was 111 emergence holes in a square yard.
Oh man,
just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with here.
It's going to be a big year, it sounds like. So
yeah, make the turkeys happy. Even my dog was eating them the last time, and a friend of mine says, man, you got to get them when they're just hatch out of those, just break out before they harden, and chop up some leeks and scrambled eggs and put them in there. And he said, they're fantastic. So I'm not sure I can force myself to do that just yet.
yeah,
something to consider. But anyway, that's coming. So
that's cool.
You just have to deal with it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of good things happening on your property. I kind of wanted to go back and ask David Hague a question. David, not so much a question. I was just hoping you could talk a little bit about the status of Coyote Run and its new standing. Would you mind addressing that a little bit?
I mean, as far as the state nature preserve?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's exciting for us. That's 230 acres of mostly the wet woods. If we can be successful on future restorations, maybe they'll accept dedication of more property. As the other gentleman mentioned, this is not for the Coyote Run in general is not meant for soccer fields and picnic tables. It's really people are the third and behind flora and fauna. So that's the tough thing to get across the local population sometimes. So that's the political parts as much as the natural part that's occupying time.
Thank you. Yeah, that's terrific. 120th state nature preserve in the state, correct?
140th.
140th. Oh my gosh, I'm staying corrected. Well, that's fantastic. And right next door to Big Columbus, where it's going to be one of the closer ones. So, yeah, it's great. Hey, Joel, your property. Do you have some plans for long-term management or protection for your vernal pools? And you're muted, so we can't hear you.
Yeah, Mick, yeah, it is. We did file it under an environmental covenant, so it's on the deed to the property. It'll be there forever. I mean, at this point in time, it is just something that's there that we enjoy. It's protected. I mean, it's about where we are with it. So.
Now that's fantastic. It's so good to hear that all three of you have done things to pass this on to the future, and that, they're going to be there for a long, long time. And it sounds like all of you have really picked a form of preservation that is very, very strong. So kudos to you guys. Yeah, really appreciative of everything you guys have done for vernal pools. It's a great story, each one of yours.
We have one more question here.
Okay.
To David, I'm curious if you plan on revising your planting plan in the future to ensure greater success and survival rates.
And that's David Hague. Since I had some 50% failure in the trees, I'll assume that question's for us. We're trying to increase the pressure on deer. That's only going to help a little bit. We're going to augment future planting with a lot more acorns and probably some transplants. Normally, you wouldn't want to transplant, especially oaks, but we have some right-of-ways where the company comes in every 5 years and destroys all the oaks anyway. So that's going to be our mini nursery. So hopefully that'll improve our rate of success.
Thanks. I also see that we have another question from Jennifer Lisi. Says she keeps wanting to see fairy shrimp, which she assumes can travel like salamanders, frogs, and turtles. Do any of you want to address that? I could try to answer it if nobody else wants to take it.
Well, Mitch, this is Dave Orndorf. Somewhere along the line, I sent you a very brief video clip close up of the water. I don't know whether you put it on save or not. It's prolific with fairy shrimp in it. That's not seeing them in person, of course, but you certainly get a good idea of what they look like if you could supply that to the lady on over the internet. I think it's only 5 seconds long. You remember the one I'm talking about?
Oh, I do. Yes, I remember seeing it.
And that's had some other invertebrates and stuff in it too. So if you want to pass that along to her, and she wants to see what a fairy shrimp looks like, that's a good one.
Can you play that, Jenna?
Yes, I will try to. And the thing Jennifer was wanting input on was regarding inoculation of vernal pools with fairy shrimp. And I kind of responded to her in the chat and mentioned, I think, if as long as you're using another local pool, transferring invertebrates from one pool to another to kind of establish the community there, I don't think that should be a problem. But if any of you have advice on that, that would be great. And I'll try to pull up that video for us.
I should know more about them. I do know that they somewhat bury their eggs in the substrates of the vernal pools, and that they stay there as they dry up, and then they often hatch out, they'll hatch out in the next season, sometimes several years later. But I don't really know exactly how they get their eggs from one vernal pool to another, because the adults, they die in the pool. So there's really no way for them to migrate that I'm aware of. So that's, maybe we got a macroinvertebrate biologist somewhere in the audience that can answer that one, or that's one we should probably get back to you.
Yeah, I would say, the eggs can be transferred by biota, kind of, maybe eating them and passing them that way, or even if they're like on a duck's feet or something, probably transfer populations that way. But yeah, where they're established, I think there may have been vernal pools there historically, or something like that.
Yeah. Thanks, Jenna.
Those of you looking at that picture now, Mick just flipped it back, but in the very end of it, in the lower right, extreme lower right, there's a little critter that's disappearing under the leaf, and there it is right there. What is that?
Looks like a crayfish to me.
Well, yeah, it kind of does, but then again, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Kind of mystified that That's generally the time when crayfish have eggs under their tail, you know, this early in the spring. So I don't know what that critter is, but there's all kinds of weird stuff in that pool.
Maybe it's an
I
alien.
must comment on the crayfish. Clearly, it's a different species than the one found in Big Walnut Creek right down here.
Yeah, Dave, I think that's a sow bug, a Celidae
Yeah,
sow bug.
It's a what?
sharp.
A Celidae is the family. It's a sow bug, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jenna's a good macroinvertebrate biologist. So.
Well, I've seen those out near your property, so I have a little background insight. I think
Great
with
answer.
that, we'll transition into the field videos. But just want to thank you guys so much for your presentations. That was great.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks, David. I think it worked out just fine.
Dale, I think I stopped sharing my screen, so let me know if you can get those field videos running. Okay, here they come.
Hello everyone, Lauren and Liz back again to show you the vernal pools for the second time this month. So let's get started. The first vernal pool is located at Gallant Woods Park in Delaware, Ohio. Spring is definitely here, but a lot of the green you see appearing is unfortunately a non-native invasive honeysuckle. The beneficial and typical vernal pool plants are still dormant. However, under the surface of the water, it is teeming with life. This was the first visit where the water temperature at 57 degrees was higher than the air temperature at only 52 degrees. We saw even more caddisfly larvae like the last visit, but they were a bit larger in size. This is a video of a western chorus frog. The outcome to all of his singing, hidden amongst the leaf litter under the water, are a bunch of tiny tadpoles, just like this one. At David Orndorf's property, we took a scenic hike through a mature and healthy woodlot to get to the vernal pool. Along the way, we couldn't help but notice all of the spring ephemerals popping up along the forest floor. Species that we found include rue anemone, twinleaf, cutleaf toothwort, Virginia bluebell, blue cohosh, violets, ramps, and so much more. This healthy woodlot, free of many invasive species, is a main factor as to why this vernal pool is healthy and productive. At first glance of looking into the vernal pool, things seemed to be quiet. However, it took a closer eye to spot some of the small spring peeper tadpoles swimming around and weaving in and out of the leaf litter in the water. Caddisfly larvae were spotted building their cases as well. Venturing into the deepest part of the pool, salamander eggs were discovered. Due to the size of the egg masses, the number of eggs inside of the masses, and that it holds its shape well out of the water, we can infer that these eggs are from a spotted salamander. You'll notice that the individual eggs have a green hue to them. This is the result of a symbiotic relationship between the spotted salamander embryo and algae. The embryos produce nitrogen-rich waste that is useful to the algae, which in turn supplies the developing embryos with extra oxygen. We can't wait to see how the vernal pool changes as we come back and join you next time.
We're here at Calamus near the boardwalk, and we're gonna head this way and seems like this one froze. We'll give it just a second.
Give me 1 second. The resolution was too good for it, so I have to play it a different way.
Sounds good. Thanks for helping with that. We're here at Calamus near the boardwalk, and we're gonna head this way and check out the vernal pool today. Just a girl and her dog. So this is one of the characteristics of a vernal pool, is where you can see that the leaves have been saturated with water. Kind of get this dark brown color and create a mat at the bottom of the vernal pool. Lots of vegetation filling in, much greener than last time.
I believe this is Siam suave. This little leaf that looks like a carrot leaf is likely going to be Siam suave, the water parsnip. Common name for that one. There's another like leaf of it just right there. These are the floating leaves of that ranunculus that we saw earlier, whose leaves that form below the water surface are much more finely divided. So these are doing the bulk of the photosynthesis. And then something else we've got is a little mosquito fern here. And it looks very similar to the ranunculus leaves, but these are free-floating plants. Those are the little rootlets that come off of the bottom. And they can form some pretty extensive mats aquatic plant that we may have discussed before. Not to be confused with that mosquito fern that we saw earlier as duckweed. Perhaps the smallest flowering plant that we have. So this grass that we're seeing is likely reed canary grass, which is an invasive grass, very common around disturbed wetlands. This one especially has a lot of agricultural runoff from the field nearby, which is likely why we're seeing a lot of this algae forming.
We're training Jasper to eat invasive species like the reed canary grass that's in here.
It's a Dolomite, is the fishing spider. I think 6-spotted is correct.
Yeah, so it's kind of jumping onto these ranunculus leaves floating at the top of the water.
Here we have the same fishing spider that we saw in the previous frame, and I don't know why this one has a different coloration, but I suspect that it has recently molted, but you can still see the same marking. These are common spiders that tend to build webs right above the water surface, and they catch things like flies and midges that emerge in their webs and have themselves a nice meal.
This is a frog mass and not a salamander mask. You can kind of see each egg outlined, whereas the salamander mass would have jelly around the entire thing. These tadpoles look a little different than the salamander larva also, which would have gills extending from the front of the body. There must be 1,000 or so of these little eggs piled up here.
Oh, there's tadpoles though.
Yeah, wow.
Oh, and they're coming out of the egg mass.
Yeah, that's a good thought. So here we can see lots of tadpoles, likely wood frog. These are likely wood frogs, as those are some of the first to lay eggs and develop into tadpoles. They are also very tiny.
Jenna's working on some macroinvertebrate exploration, seeing if we can get anything in the dip net.
This is kind of characteristic of what you pull up. A lot of leaves and algae. Here we have some small Playidae. And this is a large scud. Lots of zooplankton swimming around, some cyclops, ostracods, a small leech. Oh, yeah. Here's another ram's horn snail. Here's a Physidae snail. These are the air-breathing snails, pouch snails.
This is the giant water bug upside down. And if it comes out in this video, you should be able to see its piercing beak, which is what you don't want to get in between your toes.
Hence the name toe biter. So this is a beetle larva, and I think that it molted from here maybe into its adult form. Otherwise it's just a decomposing larva, but
yeah, you can see the pinchers on the front. Definitely predaceous.
Yeah, Dytiscidae. This is a little adult midge, so that might be hard to say which family, but one of the dipteran fly larvae.
And how can you tell it's a midge and not a mosquito?
The antennae are more hairy, and they don't have a long skinny proboscis like a mosquito would. And if we looked at this under a microscope, we would also not see fine scales that look like hairs on the edges of the wings. Here is a Nocoridae beetle. And these have very large front legs. So you can see the wide biceps that it has. And it is kind of a green color, moves very quickly, and it wants to be hidden. That's about all that we found today. Stay tuned for next time. And be sure to clean your boots and equipment after visiting a vernal pool near you. Thanks. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I put the registration link for May 21st, I believe, in the chat, and you can find that on the Eventbrite website. So check it out. Thanks for being here today.